This is our first ever joint installation demo with Fine Homebuilding and Huber Engineered Woods.
I'm Jake Bruton, guys. I'm a builder and remodeler. I'm a builder and remodeler in Columbia, Missouri. And this entire system that we're going to talk about today, I think Ben would kind of be in the same boat as me. Once you start learning about building science and you do any amount of remodeling and you have to fix window installations that were poorly installed, you start looking for systems, manufacturers, products, methods, everything to keep it from fixing your own windows in the future. And so that was my entire, I thought I was doing things the right way. I fixed some windows that I hadn't installed, somebody else had, but they had installed them with the method that I was currently using. And I went, uh-oh, I need to change what's going on. And so I literally started Googling window installation because I didn't have an outlet in my market to learn anything, I felt like, unless it was from Fine Homebuilding or one of the other publications. I had to go someplace to find it. So it's not, what I'm trying to get at is I didn't start building houses with this method. I started someplace else and I came to this for a reason. And this is part of a process and we're on a journey here. And I think Ben and I don't install windows the same way I did 2 years ago. My method's continually getting better and stronger. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is. So when you really start diving in, like Jake was saying, into the building science and really, I guess, kind of putting your heart or your passion into making sure you're delivering a good product, you start continuously learning or trying to continuously learn and up your game. And my window installations are, all of my building methods are constantly evolving as I react to feedback from what I'm doing in the field, finding new products, talking to manufacturers, talking to other builders and experts in the industry. So there is no one right answer. You know, there is no one perfect product. The idea is to learn as much as you can about the different systems and what makes them perform and figure out how you can apply that to what works for you.
And it might not, just because it works here in this instance, it might not work for the way that you're installing windows. It might not work with the windows that you have, something like that. This is a good base level universal thing that's this is about as broad as you're gonna get for American windows, flanged windows in a WRB sheathing, that sort of thing. So I think this is a really good starting point. This is a primer 101 for window install, right? Okay, so like Justin said, Ben is gonna take over in a little while and he's gonna use some liquid flashing products on his window, but we're gonna start over here with tape, basically. So we're gonna use pressure sensitive adhesives. We'll talk multiple times about pressure sensitive adhesives, roll the tape, all that. You'll hear roll the tape. The tape says roll the tape, roll the tape. That's an easy way to solve some of your problems.
To that point, and the reason Jake's talking about that is so most of these modern tapes that we're using are what's called a pressure-sensitive adhesive. So what that means is that they are not activated until you apply pressure to them. What happens is you stick it on the wall and you have to apply a certain amount of force to it and it activates and causes a process to happen called wetting. What wetting is it forces that adhesive to conform to the surface and it causes a molecular bond to start happening. This isn't just sticking to something. This is a molecular level bond that starts happening, and you're not getting the full benefit of that chemistry or that science unless you're applying the pressure to the tape in order to activate it and get it started.
And I would say that my two biggest lessons for the roll the tape thing, number one, has anybody wrapped a Christmas present? I know it's a group of guys, but every tape is pressure sensitive. So if you think about it that way and just think about this is just an extension of every other, Scotch tape is pressure sensitive, it's also not a chemical process. A lot of people mislead themselves into thinking, oh, if I press on it hard enough, something chemically different is happening in the tape. It's actually a physical bond. It's you're mashing the two things together and it creates a physical grab. It allows it to fit into all those little pores and everything.
You want the tape to cozy up and dance close with the product that you're using.
And the wetting process that he's talking about, that isn't instant. So if you're trying to train your crew, if you're trying to convince your framer or your window installers that they need to roll the tape, the day before, go to the job site with them, put 2 pieces of tape on the wall side by side, roll one of them and label which one you rolled and don't the other one, and you will convince your framer instantly the next morning when you try to have him pull those off the wall.
So what happens after you activate the wetting process with the tape is it takes anywhere from 24 to 72 hours, depending on job site conditions, for that bond to actually take hold. So, you know, you'll get guys that'll take and put a piece of tape on the wall, and they'll go like this, I can peel it right off. Yeah, because you haven't given it a chance to do its job. You put that piece of tape on the wall and you activate it, and you come back 2 days later and you try and peel it off, and you tell me if it's actually sticking. You're going to have a hard time getting it off.
So you'll hear trust but verify out of my mouth a lot. You can believe something's correct, but unless you know it's correct because you've tested it, then all you're doing is believing something. And belief doesn't go very far in building until you've actually tested it.
Water doesn't care about your beliefs.
Yeah, it does not. So that's a good way to think of it. Just because you think it's going to work doesn't mean it's going to work. So both these window installations are methods that we use on site. One of the things that we do after we get a window installed is we will literally clamp a garden hose to a ladder outside and let it spray it for 30 minutes. I realize it's not an ASTM standardized test. I realize that the window manufacturer might even say, that's unrealistic. How do you expect our window to... Okay, if my sprinkler can't hit the window for 30 minutes, then we need to have a talk. And, I mean, how many people here are testing their windows with water after they put them in? Way to go, Randy, wait. You should start testing them, because if you don't know, you don't know. Unless you've verified, all you're doing is building off of faith. So that's a good one to take away. I would recommend everybody do it.
I will say that I don't test all of my windows, but I have tested my windows in the past with different methods, and I have faith in the system that I use, so I don't go to the level where I'm taking a garden hose out and testing every window I install. But I, you know, have confidence in my methods to know, and I know how to quality control and quality analyze my installs and my crew's installs to know whether they're done correct and whether I feel that they're going to perform well.
And every time you try a new method, you're going to re-verify probably, right? Okay. So we'll start by talking a little bit about window manufacturer. Thanks to Sierra Pacific for giving us a few windows to install, first of all. This isn't a specifically like endorsement for Sierra Pacific. They're great. They make a good window. A lot of people make a good window. Thanks for giving us the windows. But in the manufacturer talk, everything we're going to talk about, you have to make a judgment call. And that judgment call is a couple things. Number one, am I going to read the window manufacturer's installation method and install perfectly to that? Am I going to read my WRB manufacturer's method and install perfectly to that, because they might not align? Or am I going to choose a method that I believe to be working for me, test it, and know that I'm installing correctly? Because when's the last time any manufacturer, not bashing manufacturers, but when's the last time that a manufacturer really had their full warranty with however you did your installation? Like, why not protect yourself, figure out what works best for what you're using, and then go from there?
So to clarify on that a little bit, we can follow the manufacturer's instructions. We might not have full faith in what they recommend, and we do that in hopes that they're gonna, you know, come through with a warranty payment if we ever have a failure following their methods. The sad fact of this is there's a lot of companies out there that aren't very great and very reputable when it comes to that, and they've got a team of lawyers that will look at your install and find some way to tear it apart. So you have the choice of either going with their install methods or going with something that you're comfortable with. Because on the end of the day, you know, it's your business on the line. It's your liability out there on whether or not this is going to be taken care of.
I think I need to put my phone on silent too. So we're talking about connections when we talk about window flashing. So our idea is that this is our weather resistant barrier. This is air and water barrier for my company. So we're trying to make that connect to the glass, to the frame, to the window. So if we don't connect the two, then we don't have control what goes through our building, what transfers through our building. It's all about the connections and making everything continuous in the end. And even when you start talking about tape,
devil's in the details.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be continuous even. Like when you start this process, it's like, oh, well, that one's on the inside, that one's on the outside, or something to the effect.
So something I hear often about tape applied for flashings on buildings is, you know, everybody knows that we should be shingle lapping our flashings on the outside. Well, if you look at tape, it's technically a reverse lap. You know, there's nothing coming down above covering that to divert water over it. These tapes are something cool that's called a self-terminated flashing tape. And what that means is that doesn't matter Okay, there are other tapes on the market that are a little thicker, and when you get into some of the commercial products where you technically have to terminate them. So what that means is at the top edge of your tape right here, if you're running a horizontal piece, you'd have to come back with a sealant or a termination bar or something like that and terminate that to create a mechanical lap right there. These tapes are self-terminating. I can tell you I've had pieces of zip tape and some of the other flashing tapes on toolboxes of mine for well over a decade right now, and they have been through job site abuse, weather, UV, rain, dirt, everything you could imagine, and they are still on there. And you're not going to put that kind of stress on this material once it's installed on your house. So,
and even if you're really, really worried about that top edge, put your siding on a Rainscreen. Now the system's not getting challenged. 2% of the water that hits the house is getting is touching your weather-resistant barrier. Like, how much room for error do you have if 2% of the water that hits the house is actually getting to the part that you're using to protect?
Okay, right. So we've bored these people enough with technical nerd speak. Why don't we put some of this tape on and show you how this system works with the flexible membrane here at the sill.
So we're using all Huber products today. This is their stretch tape. I don't know has anybody seen their stretch tape before? Has anybody used it?
Who here is using sill pans for your window installs? Show of hands. Who's installing sill pans? It doesn't matter if it's, you know, zip product. Who here is installing sill pans before they install a window? Okay. So the purpose of what Jake's doing right here is there's two types of windows. There's windows that leak, and there's windows that are going to leak. That's it. I was in a class a couple of months ago with a very prominent building scientist who tests enclosures for a living, and he will tell you the exact same thing. He says they're either leaking on the day you install them or they're leaking soon after. It's the hard fact of it. Windows have a lot asked for them. They've got to protect our building from all of the elements. They have moving parts. They have dissimilar materials that are expanding and contracting at different rates. So what we need to do is we need to assume that our window at some point is going to leak, and we need to give some means of egress for that water. So what's going to happen is we're going to get water through our window assembly somehow, and it's going to follow gravity. It's going to drop down. It's going to hit our sill over here. And this is a critical point, because if it hits our sill, it's going to follow right down here through these joints in our frame. It's going to go right into our wall assembly, and then we're going to have rot issues. We're going to have structural issues. We're going to have mold issues. Everybody knows what happens when water gets into a building. So what we need to do at a minimum is we need to ensure that there's some sort of sill pan right here to catch any of that water and direct it out.
And so we're going to use that sill and positive slope towards the outside to make sure the water ends up out here, and we're not worried about any water that's out here. It's outside the house. So there's a couple different ways that we can do that. You can ask your framers to frame your sill pitched at 5 degrees. 5 degrees is enough to create movement towards the outside. Or you can cut a piece of cedar bevel siding or clapboard siding that actually has a pitch to it already and tack in the bottom here.
Really down and dirty method, okay? And this is down and dirty, but it works. You come through after your framing, you knock up the back edge of your sill. This is running towards the outside now. So now if you have that water comes in here and hits something, it's running towards the outside. That's it. It doesn't have to be fancy. You know, we use more advanced assemblies and stuff like that, but this is it. The principle is you're just trying to use gravity to help you to get that water outside of the building.
And so if we're sloped positively to the outside there, we're still, you know, southern yellow pine, Doug fir here. We're not exactly watertight. So one of the things that we need to think about is this has to be waterproof. And so in speaking about connections, we're adding a connection here for weather barrier here to weather barrier on the outside. I think that the framers should be perfectly fine with pitching it 5 degrees because they're putting jacks underneath already. They're cutting these jacks, and that piece of clapboard siding, if I'm asking the framers to put that in, they're splitting that into multiple pieces with roofing nails because they're beating the heck out of it because they're used to hammering 16s in place rather than roofing nails, things like that. For our method, I think the simplest thing that we've done so far is just pitch it beforehand. It's a little simpler that way.
On the flip side of the coin, I follow a different method of thought, and this all comes down to using whatever works for you. I use a piece of bevel siding right here. Generally, we do clapboard jobs and stuff like that. You guys here in the Southwest that use hardy products, you can take and just save some of that scrap. We hang on to a couple of links after we're done with a job, and we stick it at the shop, and we just cut a piece, put it right in here. That creates our positive pitch.
both methods are okay.
Yeah, it all works. It's the concept,
right?
You know?
That's the idea here.
The
Yeah. The clever didn't come.
Okay.
So we're
sent us
sloped
channel
in
rustic.
framing. Yeah, they sent us the wrong thing. That's a good reason to have your framer do it for you. So if you noticed, I put a center line on my frame, and then I folded the tape and put a center line on the tape. This stuff can be ever so slightly finicky, and it can be a little bit of a chore. Help me out here, Ben.
If you have a big gnarly beard like this, be careful on a warm day. It's painful.
Give me a pull there. And so,
oh, he's brave. He's going for the whole thing.
I
First
am.
shot.
So you can see I have that center mark. I'm able to then set this in here. And the whole reason to be on that center mark is it just gives me the ability to work a little more cleanly. My client's gonna see this. I'm not putting siding on the same day that I put windows in. If my tape comes to the same point or close to the same point, if I were to start here and just peel around, I'm decent at this, and I would say that if I started here, I'd wind up here. This tape stretches that much. So you have to pay attention to the point that you don't have to. I choose to pay attention so that I'm judged on the work that I'm doing as being clean and paying attention.
It drives a culture too on your job site. If your other subcontractors and carpenters,
That's me.
other
Sure, somebody leaned through
subcontractors
the
and
window, I
carpenters
think.
come onto the job and they see that you're giving a level of care to your installs. It drives everybody to try and do a better job, hopefully.
And again, your clients don't necessarily know what a good window installation looks like, but if your tape work looks clean and your site's clean, they're gonna go, oh, these guys care. They know what they're doing.
So what are you doing right there, Jake?
So I have fat fingers and can't get my fingers into that corner. I like to use my speed square in both directions to just press it into the corner to start out with. And you can get the roller in pretty darn close, but after you've used the roller a little bit, that last little leading edge.
That works great. One of my go-tos is I'll use just a Bondo spreader or something like that. When I'm working with tapes, I usually have one of these in my pouch with me because other than the roller, they also work as a means to add the pressure to the tape. They also allow you to get into corners and stuff like this. If you're doing the tape on the wall panels into an inside corner, you can use these to tuck yourself in and get your details nice and tight. And
So
there's
I
many
didn't
ways
roll
to skin
this.
the cat.
I didn't roll this yet, but I can still.
I smushed
Oh,
it.
you smushed it while I was smushing back here.
Yeah.
You can still reposition, and you can move this stuff around quite a bit. If you don't pull it far enough, it's not the end of the world. All you're trying to do is connect here to here.
A little tip too, if you're working with this stuff, when you're outside in warm temperatures, like today we're borderline for this stuff getting a little finicky. This stuff gets soft and really sticky as the temperature goes up. If you're having a hard time and you're fighting with it and it's just kind of sticking to everything, anybody who's done like ice and water on a roof on a hot day knows how rough that can be. That stuff, once it touches, it's done, it's game over, get a new piece. A way to kind of deal with that is take a roll of this stuff and toss it in a cooler while you're working. Throw some ice in it, throw some cold drinks in alongside it. Something just to kind of keep the temperature down on it, and that'll buy you a little bit more workability as you're installing. Yeah, go ahead.
What temperature is it too cold?
Okay, so the question is at what temperature is it too cold? I'm going to
20.
defer to somebody from Huber
20.
here.
Zero.
Yeah, zero in climbing is generally
It's
what we
zero.
look for. Yeah. So I will tell you that I am in coastal Maine. It gets cold and windy and wet up there, and we've never had any issues installing this stuff, even in the coldest temperatures. It's actually kind of nicer to work with it on cold temperatures because it behaves a little bit better. Not to say that it's hard to work with, but it's just a little more forgiving.
Everything has the sweet spot, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't want to work with
55 degrees, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
this stuff is like.
So when we're continuing the idea of continuous, we're connecting our barriers. So when we get the window in, you'll see how my air barrier translates to the back side of the window. Right now, I'm trying to connect my framing to the face of my WRB, and I'm not going to pre-cut this tape because I can go up high enough here that I know I can catch it with my other piece.
And what Jake's doing here, this is belt and suspenders method. You know, if you go ahead and you put this sill pan in here, you are way ahead of the curve for most of the industry. Okay, you're doing an excellent job. What we're showing you is how to keep taking this up levels and levels and levels depending on what your job site requirements are. So what this does is this connects here. So same principle, if we get any water in at some point, it's going to be able to hit this tape and be directed down and have no chance to get inside of our framing cavity and cause damage. The other thing that this does for us now at the same time is this allows for no air leakage here. you get something called interstitial leakage in a building. And what that is it's where air travels between cavities in the building. And this can cause issues because it can bring moisture along with it, and it can bring water vapor along with it and cause damage. It can cause mold issues. So if you're sealing these seams at the conjunction of two of your products here, so you're framing to your sheathing, there's nowhere for that air to go. You know, it's going to come in here and it can't go anywhere. There's no joint for it to follow through. So this is next level beyond a sill pan.
Yeah, belt and suspenders is the best way to put it too. We think
we'll do
get
belt and suspenders and garter suspenders and tape and buttons. You can keep going.
And if you'll notice, I'm putting more on the face of the 2x6. I know that I might have a little bit more difficulty sticking to that 2x6 than I will the sheathing that it's made to stick to. So I don't mind having a shorter leg to fold around here. And that's just one of those personal preference things. And so now we are shingled, even though we talked about the fact that you don't have to shingle. Why not? You know, if you have the opportunity. And now we have a couple different choices for continuing this connection to our head. One, we can go back to the stretch tape and we could do the exact opposite of this and up and around. I'm more concerned with my sill being monolithic than my head being monolithic, because any leak that I get here, or most of the leaks that I'm going to get here, are going to come in, hit the top of my window, and come down. And my effect is going to show here or here. Everybody's replaced OSB right here, right? So because that stuff is a little more pricey than this stuff, I like to cut 2 6-inch pieces of that, and I'll do the corners. Of course, I dropped it out there where it's going to get hotter too. This stuff also has, see the white lines? It's got 6-inch marks. If you lay it out in the window, then you can just pull 2 marks further and cut it without having to use a tape measure. And now I've added 6 inches on each side. Or here, I'm going to cut 6-inch pieces. And you'll see after I go to put them up there, they won't actually be 6 inches. Do it like this so I don't cut my sill. Does anybody have any questions? Speak up if you do, please.
Can you explain how you cut the tape?
I use a knife.
No, you got a trick. Cut in 2 directions.
Oh, yeah. When I'm cutting this stuff or even this tape, I will... I'm going to step around front, Ben. Yeah.
Situation where you use a house wrap, would you still do the same application?
The question was, what do you do in the situation where you're using a house wrap? Would you do the same thing?
So, number one, I like this better. So house wrap isn't part of my assembly anymore for the most part, but it's still just connecting the layers. It's still shedding water. You want it out, you want it down. So if you had a house wrap product coming up here, you can tape that same exact way and get that water to run to the outside and down.
And there's a lot of different ways to kind of skin the cat when it comes to installing with a house wrap as far as flashing goes. I'll tell you my preferred method right now that I trust the most. So, you know, everybody normally knows like the X cut on your material. You X cut it, you fold it back into the opening, you staple it, and you go on and you plug your window into the hole. The problem with that is okay, so when we're installing a sheet applied membrane like that, how do we put it on? Staples. Staples make holes in it, and then that stuff sits outside for a week or two through a windstorm, or a month or two, depending on the scope of your project, and it flaps, and it makes thousands of little holes in it. And what that does is that allows water and air to get behind that membrane. Okay, so now what we've done by taking and cutting it and folding it into this opening, we've created a short circuit path to drive that water and air right into our opening. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have that gable wall up above this window right here. Water and air are going to drive through all those little staple holes. They're going to travel down the wall, and now you just gave them a path behind that membrane right here into the inside of your building.
Negating effectively this sort of method.
So my method that I trust when I'm using a sheet applied membrane like that is I install my window and I cut back the house wrap about an inch outside of the flange. So what you end up having is you'll have your counter flashing like Jake has right here. You'll have about an inch of exposed sheathing, and then you have your WRB right there. And what you do is you tape across all 3 of those. And the reason for that is any of that water or air that gets behind that membrane, as it travels down, it now hits a mechanical stop where that tape is applied to that sheathing layer, and there's no way that it can travel underneath my flange and inside of my framing here. So that's my preferred method. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about that, different cuts, different sequencing, so on and so forth. The whole point is just pick what works for you. I will say that these products work excellent with those products as well, so you can make them play nice with one another.
What Justin was pointing out is it's one of those, like, the more times you work with something, you realize that just going like that causes problems and you get tape sticking. And when the tape is valuable and in short supply sometimes because we have to special order it, everything we're doing is either starting in a 1/4 inch in and cutting, and I do this with the stretch tape too, or I'll cut half one direction, half the other direction.
My little go-through.
Not sticking to anything else at that point.
I love that we do everything differently because I can show people other methods. So my go-to is, everybody know what these are? These are like Olfa knives. These are like the snap blade knives right here. These, when you're working with tape, work really well. And Jake, can I trade you? Will you hold this mic for a second and I'll take that roll of tape?
You want me to hold it in front of you?
Yeah, if you would. So the reason I like these is what I can do is I can figure out about how much tape I want. I can take and put that blade right on there and go right across like that. Okay. So now I've got my pieces free.
Take it back.
These work also really well for getting you into like little detailed spaces. So I'll let Jake go ahead and then I'll show you a little tip or a little technique that you can use also.
So if you're trying for simplicity, you can just go all the way across. It's not imperative that you split it up like this. I like to split it up because it's just a little bit easier to work with as well. Because laying that thing in and trying to spread it out is easier than trying to tuck it up. I wouldn't do wider than probably 3 or 4 feet by myself, just because I don't want to waste any of this tape. We want to be effective with the material that we use, and so it's not worth it for me to go, okay, one guy can do that if he wastes $40 worth of tape in 3 hours.
Okay. Alternatively, Jake likes to peel all of his backing off at one shot. The way I approach this is I peel about 6 inches to a foot off to start if I'm doing a long run. I get that started and then I pull the backing as I work my way across the window opening. Here, can I get you to try something, Jake?
Yeah.
Peel your piece off and fold it around this. And then tuck it into the corner.
Peel it all the way?
Yep, go ahead. Peel it all the way off. Rip it right over there. Pinch both sides of it.
If you can
get your fingers off of it. This is just illustrating how those little things are handy for you to work in details. And
I think I just learned something new while teaching a demonstration.
Is somebody recording
I've totally
that?
never done it
He'll
that
never
way
admit to that.
Come back tomorrow and I'll teach that as my method.
Yes.
Tomorrow will be my method, though. There's the difference.
So, what Jake's just done right here is now he's bridged from our count of flashings here on our jam over to our head so that he can run a piece of the normal tape across. If you don't have this stretch tape on hand or you're trying to conserve it, you can also use what's called a butterfly. And I'll set the mic down here and I'll show you guys how I cut this.
Here, I'll do it.
Here, I got a piece with backing on here. This works best with the tape with backing on it. So you take this piece of the 6-inch tape. I hope everybody can hear me. I use this because it's got the backing on it. You fold it in half. Make a cut like that. Make a cut like that. This makes a bow tie. I want to show them how you install.
Yeah. We'll go down. We'll pretend like I didn't flash the bottom yet. See why he calls it a bow tie? Does everybody get that? The shape? Just making sure. Ben, am I worried about the scratches you just put in my WRB with your knife over there?
Am I worried about the scratches? Well, apparently my mic. No, it's on. Am I worried about the scratches that I just put in with my knife here? No, this is not something that you need to be concerned about.
Ben, give Tracy the mic.
If you want to lose sleep for no reason, then go right ahead. You can worry yourself about these things, but what it comes down to is that the things that we have to worry about in our sheathing causing a problem is when we have a wetting potential that is greater than the drying potential of our accessories. So, like this, how much water is that going to let in the building? None. Don't worry about it.
How about the fasteners?
Yeah.
Faster. Yes.
Test.
Good question. Okay, so I think I'm hot again. So the question is do we have to worry about the fasteners letting water into our building? No. And I used to. When I first started working with this product, I don't know, decade ago, something like that, I worried about it. I would, go back and tape over each one of these fastener holes, or I'd use the liquid flashing product and go back over them and worry about that. Basically what it comes down to is as long as your fastener is not more than halfway through the panel, there's no potential for it to ever leak. Furthermore, if your fastener is more than halfway through the panel, how much water is actually going to get through this hole? Okay, we're talking what? Drops, and that's under probably like hurricane force winds. We spill more water in our house on a daily basis than that's ever going to let in. The fact is that the products that we build with in the residential market have drying potential. Wood can absorb and move and redistribute and dry out water. It's what it does great. It's also its downfall because it shrinks and twists and moves and cracks and so on and so forth. Basically what it comes down to is you're never going to see enough water through that for it to ever cause any sort of damage in your assembly.
So 2 things to add. Number 1, trust but verify. We have sprayed a garden hose on overdriven fasteners and then depressurized the house to 100 pascals of pressure, and we couldn't get it to leak. That's it. That's an easy, okay, let's make sure that Huber's not telling us a story that we don't have to worry about that. And then number 2, we go back to let's put it on a rain screen, and then 2% of the water gets back there, and it doesn't even get enough water to even ever see water because it doesn't get wet.
So who here knows what a rain screen is? Okay, awesome, cool. So basically what a rain screen is it's a way of you adding space between your weather resistive barrier and the backside of your cladding. This can be as simple as some of the products have about a little 16th inch crinkle to them, or these little silicone dots glued to it. There's the other products that have like the mesh, it looks like the scrubby things for your pots and pans. They can staple to the side of the house. The other option is you can add strips of plywood or furring strips, any sort of wood to pack out and create an airspace behind your siding. And what that does for you is it does 3 things really. It gives us cavity where water can freely drain via gravity down and outside of your assembly, because if anybody thinks that water's not getting through your siding, you're fooling yourself. Water's getting through your siding. So it gives a path for this to drain. Now what it also does is it allows air to move up through here. So if we do get any water inside of here, or we do have any leak events or anything like that, we have airflow now. So now we're allowing it to dry. The third thing, and this is the selling point on using a rain screen, is it lowers the temperature back there, okay? And why this is the selling point, and this works also with the airflow, is anybody who paints siding knows that, after 10, 15 years, we've got to repaint it. Okay, why do we have to repaint it? Because it starts to fail and it starts to peel off. Why does it fail and peel off? Because we get water behind it and the sun heats it up. It gets warm and it forces that water to turn into vapor and push back out and literally push the paint off of our siding. That's why paint fails. So now if we add an airspace back there, we're allowing that water to get out, we're keeping that temperature cooler, and we're not having that vapor drive pushing our paint off. So now we can go to the client and we can say, hey, for a little bit more money, we can install a rain screen on your building and your paint's gonna last longer. How many homeowners here or any of your clients like to repaint their buildings? None of them. Nobody wants to do that. So for an upcharge and an emotional sell that we can give them for the quality, longevity, and the low maintenance of their building, we're also building a better wall assembly that has the ability to dry and last longer. So use rain screens.
Okay, back to Ben's bow tie. So if we didn't have the stretch tape, we'd have one piece of tape on the sill and a piece coming down the side. Before we put our side piece on, we'd tuck the center of that bow tie right in the middle, and then we would press this into the corner. I like to use a scraper.
That's an awesome tip. I'm stealing that.
So then I can then bring my second piece of tape down, and over top of that, and I've connected the two. This is a little bit more time consuming. This tape's really good. I would recommend just spending the money to buy the stretch tape. It really is a reliable system.
It really is awesome, but sometimes you get into a project and all of a sudden you find that you got to peel a window or something like that in a remodel and you didn't have a roll of stretch tape on the truck that day. So this is a method to get you through. So the question is when we go to installing our windows, the manufacturers and good building practices want us to put a bead of sealant behind the flange of the window on 3 sides, never on the bottom flange, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a minute. The question is will that sealant stick to the tape? Yes, if it's a high quality, good exterior sealant. Yes.
Make sure you check with your tape manufacturer though, because we had a window that we installed with a product that we thought was very reliable and was not an inexpensive product, and we had to uninstall a window. The first one that we installed with it, we had to uninstall the next day because we needed to get some sheet goods in the house, and it had melted the tape. And it was like, oh well, if we would have read the manufacturer's instructions, we would have known that that wasn't one of the approved sealants. So silicone is probably the best thing you can get.
Yeah,
you know.
Same here, but I also hate people's lawyers calling me.
Yeah. Read them once, and then you can say to your guys that at least you've read the instructions. Okay, so we're connecting the corners up top here, and I'm going to use the seam tape, and I'm going to not try to push that one in place. I'm going to pre-cut, and again, I just cut it most of the way across. I'm going to put it on upside down too, which kills me. We try for the same procedure on all of our jobs. So I rolled each piece of tape as I put it in, and that's just like my personal habit. I always try to I put it on the wall, I go ahead and roll it while I'm standing there, even if I'm taping seams on the product. When my guys are doing it without me, they have a rule that they stop at this point and roll all the tape because they think they're faster that way. I forget that one step. If I do it the way that I normally do it, my habit allows me to remember to do all of it. But I think that it's one of those simple things that once you've worked with it a couple times, you don't forget. I just get caught up in things.
Yeah, it starts to become second habit, and it doesn't have to be a roller. You know, Huber likes to have us use the roller because it's something that, you know, everybody can see. But the point is you've got to apply pressure to it. The fact is you can use like that little Bondo spreader like I have, or you can use your speed square or something like that.
What about your hand? Can you use your hand?
Your hand does not work. You need a rigid tool, something that can force and focus pressure onto the surface of that tape. So edge of the speed square works great in a pinch. You know, sometimes I'll be up on scaffolding or staging or pump jacks and I'll drop my roller, and I don't really want to climb down because I've got one more piece of tape to do. So I'll just use like that little spreader or like the side of my speed square or something like that. It's the principle that you have to apply pressure to the tape in order for it to do its job.
So there's one more step before we're ready to start installing our windows. Actually, there's two, because I forgot I put this piece of tape on here. To avoid the reverse lap, even though it's not the end of the world, let's just take this off and start over, actually.
He's worrying about something that doesn't need to be worried about right now.
I like it, man.
That makes him a good builder, though.
I worry about lots of things.
My boss who I work for has a saying that says, if you ever want to ensure that you never have a restful night's sleep again, learn building science. Because as soon as you start to learn some of it, you start thinking about all the stuff you've done in your career before, going, oh man, what did I do? Oh God, I hope they don't call back.
So we're pretending like there's a seam underneath this. I'm going to ask my guys not to roll that piece of tape when they're installing. So if they went in and installed sheet goods, I'm going to ask them not to roll that little section above the window so that I can pull it back like that. And if it sticks together and doesn't want to come apart, yank it off and put another piece on it. It's not the end of the world. So number one, we've protected our head there by pulling that sill, or that piece of tape. Ben probably is right on that. It's not the end of the world.
It's self-terminating.
But most manufacturers are going to ask you to not treat it like that. So we can handle the last sill step here a couple different ways. If we use cedar bevel siding here, and you have it on site, cut a couple pieces that are like 4 or 5 inches wide, reverse it so that you're creating a level plane for your window to sit on. Take care of any of that shimming at the same time. The cedar bevel siding is super easy if you've already done it. You know, if you've already taped and have your sill underneath there. If you sloped it the opposite way in framing, set a couple shims in there if you don't have the siding on site. And I like to tack them with a little piece of tape so they don't walk off while I'm setting the window in.
Quick little tip, if you're doing this, whether you're using composite shims like Jake's got here, if you're using scraps of bevel siding, take your time and take a level and throw it across those right now, and you can cut like some scraps of tar paper or something like that, and you can use those as little microscopic shims to pack underneath there. And what you're doing is you're creating the sill right now with that process to be dead level, okay? So if you take a little bit of time right now, packing some, you know, tar paper or something underneath those shims, when you go and set your window right in there, guess what? You don't have to mess around trying to stuff shims in there, get your flat bar in, and maybe ding up the edge on the inside or something like that. Your window's gonna sit in there and it's gonna be level as soon as you put it in.
Ben, do you want to grab me a screw gun?
Sure.
Who was it that asked the caulking question about 3 sides? Most of them, okay. Most of the manufacturers are going to recommend that you put sealant behind 3 sides. One of the things that I hate when I'm installing windows is to have my hands covered with silicone and then have to touch the glass to hold it in place or move it back and forth. So I get very particular, and I will dry fit once. Uh-oh. It's got the protector stuff on it still and it won't fit.
Oh, nice. Shootsy scores.
So this is part of the reason that I went ahead and taped those shims in place, because I know I'm going to stick this in. Oh, I didn't tape the top again. I'll tape it when I get it back out. How come nobody pointed that out? Somebody had to have noticed that.
I saw
So
it. I just
I'm
let
level
you roll
plumb and
with it.
square. My guy on the inside has centered the window for me. I'm going to trace on the 3 sides that I'm going to be adding sealant, so that when I start making that caulking line while I have the window out, it's not sticking out here where I'm going to put my hand in it when I'm trying to set the window in place. Let's finish taping.
So why don't we install sealant on the bottom flange? Let water out, that's right. So what we've done is we've just gone through this whole process right here of creating this ability for that water that gets inside eventually to get down, and we have to give it some way to get out. So you never seal behind your bottom flange, and you never tape over your bottom flange. There are some people that tell you that you should. Don't listen to them.
What about the air seal there?
What about the air seal there? And that's a very valid question. So by this being open now, we've left a space where air can now pass through the inside of our building. So then what you're going to do is, most people, you know, when I learned this in the industry when I was younger, is we'd pack some fiberglass insulation. Nowadays, guys we use canned foam around the sides there. That works great. Better than that is to go ahead and use Baccarat and a sealant, or there's a lot of specialty tapes out on the market right now that you can actually apply to the window beforehand, before you even stick it in the opening, and that'll create an air seal on the back side of the window. So now what we've done is we have 2 layers of control. We have our water controlled outside at the exterior layer here, and then we have our air controlled at the interior side of the window here.
We find the caulking difference.
That's why we care about this taping right here, not only for the water protection, but also for the air leakage there, because now we've sealed that joint right there where air could get through and inside of our cavity.
You don't have to put anything in it.
So we're not putting sealant in because we have to take these things apart at the end of this. So you'd use your handy dandy sealant application tool.
All right, we're level plumb and square already. That was quick.
Can I show everybody a real quick tip here? If you're installing windows by yourself and you don't have somebody on the inside to center it for you, you can take and, hold on, you push your window all the way to one side, you make a mark, slide it over, make a mark, and then you center it between those 2 marks and your window's centered. So if you're working by yourself, it's just a quick little way that you don't have to have somebody on the inside to help you.
If all your guys are tired of hearing you talk about connecting the air barrier.
Oh God, my crew just glazes over when I start talking building science. They appreciate it, but they are sick of me prattling on about it. They gave us self-drilling metal.
Tapping screw.
Metal.
Just so we know it's not going to fall out. Maybe. Okay. Okay. So our beta sealant on the 3 sides, we're leaving the bottom open. You're gonna hear us say that a ton today. And now we're ready to go ahead and continue making the connections, because right now, technically that beta sealant is connecting us to here, but belt and suspenders approach every time. At that point, it's just more of the seam tape. So I'm putting that on there at a point where I know that I'm going to come across the top. I know Ben said it multiple times. It doesn't have to be that way.
Self-terminating.
But why not?
But why not? That's exactly
We have the
it.
opportunity.
That's exactly it. So you'll run into situations on job sites just because of sequencing and the way work flows that you can't get everything perfectly shingle flashed. My point is that you don't have to worry about it. If you can, why not? They've tested this tape to last longer than any of us are ever going to be alive before it fails and we have any sort of issues with it. But why not just, you know, do the best we can?
I like to take my finger and set it on top of the flange, and that's enough to keep it down low enough. This wall moves more than my walls at home.
I hope so.
Now, Ben, even though it's self-terminating, if I have tape that's sticking up here, are you putting another piece of tape up top, or are you leaving it at 1? If my behind liquid flat or my behind stretch tape, like right there, is sticking up, are you putting another one on to cover that edge even though?
I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
As long as it's tooled in adequately and you've applied pressure to it and it conforms to that surface, no, I'm not worried about it.
And now we don't have a ladder either.
Textbook install, folks. Textbook install.
We're trying here.
So back to why I love these things too. Sometimes it's hard to get, when you've got all your fasteners in here, sometimes it's hard to get your roller to really conform around them. You can take one of these things and it allows you to kind of work right in here. You can go down the seam like that, right at the edge of your flange. And you can kind of detail and make sure that your tape is conforming to the surface really well. So these are super handy. And they're cheap. These are like 59 cents. Huber will even send you a bunch of them if you ask nicely.
Now that we are weather tight, we still are open down here, and that's a pathway to get air to the inside. And so you're going to have a method. There's multiple different ways, just like installing on the outside. There's tapes that you can use to go from the jamb of your window to the jamb of your rough opening. There's a couple manufacturers that make liquid products that you can put on there after you insulate. And there's even just using a can of spray foam if you feel that that's necessary.
Is that going to fill up that space where the water's supposed to drain out of?
So I would, if you were going to spray foam,
so the question was, is that going to fill up that space if we put you know, single component can foam into there?
my suggestion would be fill the back half.
So,
and then you're leaving a void at the front. And if you're worried about R value up there, stuff the front with fiberglass and then fill the back half. Or just use the foam in the last half an inch or something.
I'm going to be a dream crusher right now. You don't have to worry about the R value in that opening right there. People are going to say there's no insulation in there. You know, you've got airflow movement through there. The amount of energy that's going to get lost through that cavity by air flowing through there, I've got more change in my pocket than you're going to save in the lifetime of your building through that. I would much rather see that cavity as open as possible, because then it allows, like we were talking about with Rainscreen, drainage and air circulation through there. So in the event that there's water getting into that open, it can freely drain, nothing stopping it, and air can get through there to dry it out.
And I think you're probably right. If you think back 25 years ago to installing windows where they're stuffing with fiberglass only, fiberglass is air permeable. There's plenty of temperature moving with that air still, even though fiberglass is insulation. There's, you know, that's a different thing. So
Something that I'd like to say, and this is just kind of like a personal cross that I bear, I'm really trying to avoid using can foams. Okay, anybody that's taken apart or remodeled or retrofitted something that's had can foam in it for a couple of years, you know what that stuff does? Feel that stuff in your hand? It like just turns to powder in your hands. So what we're hopefully doing is asking that can foam to last the lifetime of the window, doing its job, not only stopping air, but also stopping water. And that stuff gets really dry and what's called friable over time and will break down. So I'm really trying to push to not use can foam in these situations right here.
I think most of the manufacturers from America at this point say no can foam as well. So.
Do you ever shim your bottom flange?
We don't. I feel like
the question is do you ever shim under your bottom flange?
They make horseshoe shims work great for there if you're really worried about keeping that out. If you have an aluminum fin, you can put your hand underneath of it and give it a little pull like that and just leave it. We don't. There's enough variation in this tape down here that we're not particularly worried about it. I don't think you have to worry about it.
I worry about it.
This is a perfect he said, she said sort of thing going on here. Does anybody else have any more questions about doing it with the pressure sensitive adhesives? Yes, Luke.
I think it's important to talk about the header seal, how much, if you have your exposed 2x facing down, you have to bring that tape all the way in. Whereas if you do a header seal or bring a 1/2 inch of zip to cover those headers, that air barrier is a lot simpler to do.
So what Luke is saying is that air infiltration, if you have a header and you have multiple points that go upwards in that header, you know, header foam, header sheathing, that we're not just sealing the sheathing product to the first framing member, we're sealing to all of them. So we're connecting the entire opening. That's a good point.
Can you tell me the difference between the zip system flashing tape versus like the standard window tape that that you can just use, that you just get?
The starting point is going to be, from a technical...
What was the question again?
The difference between this tape and a regular window flashing tape. The starting point for our conversation is this tape is made to work with this board.
And why?
I actually don't understand the chemical aspect of why it is. We have to grab somebody from...
It's really just chemistry. One thing I can tell you about this tape, and I don't also know the chemical properties of how it reacts with this product, but this is a fully acrylic tape. Fully acrylic tapes have the longest lifespan of any of the tape options out there on the market, versus the bituminous or the asphalt base or the modified bituminous tapes. They will eventually dry out and fail. We have a saying that the tapes we used to use weren't, peel and stick. They were stick and peel, because we'd stick them onto the window and we'd come back the next day and they had peeled off. I'm sure everybody's kind of seen this. Temperatures are cold, there's a little bit of dew or frost or something like that on your wall, and you're trying to put that tape onto the wall and it's not sticking. So acrylic tapes, about as bomb-proof as you can get.
Question?
Yeah. So how do you do it with stucco? How do you make it work from the bottom?
The flashing aspect? So I would say that the easy answer...
the question was how do you do it with, how do you integrate with stucco?
Sorry. The easy answer is everything gets a drainage plane behind it, so at that point stucco is no different than clapboard siding. We're allowing that cavity to fully drain, venting top and bottom so that it's pressure equal, so that it's not going to have any points to catch and hold water. If you put that drainage plane back there, then every cladding you put in front of it's the same thing at that point, because it's not touching the building. And as soon as it's not touching the building, it's not affecting the building.
Alternatively, so depending on which method you're using for installing stucco, code right now calls for 2 layers of a WRB. You could go ahead, and the reason for that is it creates a little bit of space between those 2 layers. You can just go ahead and flash into that area, and there is draining potential there. It's not great, but there is draining potential there. The best practices install for any sort of stucco product is to create at least a 3/16 air gap behind that stucco for drainage. That way we ensure that we don't see failures, and you're probably also going to see that become code here in the next cycle. So
they're changing it.
They're changing
we think
it.
It's